Welcome to Jung at Harp, episode number 164, Surrendering to the Eyes of Love. I'm Kathleen Wiley, a Jungian Psychoanalyst in North Carolina, and I am here with Deborah Henson-Conant, a composer, a creative, a mentor, a coach. We both play the harp, and that is why we call this Jung at Harp. Almost every week we come together with a question that is bubbling up for us in our life and in our work. And we join in the art of conversation and invite you, if you're watching live, to join in with us by adding comments on whatever platform you are listening by. And if technology works and we work, we'll see those comments. But we come together with a question to engage in dialogue with, to see what bubbles up, what of a deeper reality and a deeper universal principle or truth, if we want to call it that, bubbles up that might actually give us a tether and some ideas about moving forward around the question. So part of what bubbled up this morning was this idea of how do we move forward when we are paralyzed or sluggish about moving towards our harp or whatever it is in life because of our perfectionism. And just so happened that recently, like in the last 2 weeks, I looked up the definition of the word perfect because I was working with an ancient text around an intelligence and a capacity that the quote says it perfects all bodies. And so I thought, what does perfect mean? And what I discovered is that the archaic definition of perfect means to make whole or to get as close to the likeness of. It's only a more modern day meaning of perfect that means to make flawless. And in the context of the material I was studying, the being made whole and as close to the likeness of wasn't a likeness that exists outside of or someone else, but the true likeness of one's own nature. The description was actually talking about living into the wholeness of who you are and who you are created to be. So that's part of the backdrop of how we came up with this question. And there's lots more to say, but Deborah, do you want to join in here?
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by it and sort of all the stuff that's coming up in my mind. And I'm thinking about this likeness thing, which is because as a child, well, so first of all, because I recently realized as I'm starting to get all of my work ready for publishing, that each of the pieces that I've written is in the likeness of a piece of music that um, that affected me. So and basically has to do with form. So my mother used to sing this Schumann suite of songs called Frauenleben. It was about a woman's life and love, and it was a song cycle, and so the structure or the form of song cycle came into me as a way to be able to express. And so I've written several song cycles, and I fell in love with musicals, and then I fell in love with Ravel and Debussy, and then there was dance music, and then I began to understand that there was music for concert performance that affected certain types of your mind. And then there was the same piece, like the Mother Goose Suite, which I really loved. Ravel wrote it for orchestra. I mean, he wrote it for concert performance and also for ballet. And the same piece, the same themes have a different form for the ballet. And I found myself often thinking, well, I like this better or I like that better. As a child, I was into that assessment, and then and as an adult, I begin to realize that the likeness of something, or how it exists, the model that it gives me for freedom, can also become, when it starts kind of getting rancid in a way, me looking at this and saying, well, that's not like enough. It's not like enough. So the I mean, we talk all the time about the noumenon, and meaning a thing in itself as separate from how it appears in the world. And I'm fascinated by that. Like for yesterday, I was stopped because I looked up in my run and there was a huge beehive, just like kind of floating in the wind, this huge hive. And
Wow.
as I looked up, I realized over to the side, there was also this squirrel nest. And then I looked over there and there was an apartment building. And I looked up there and there was a single family home. And I was like, whoa, home one, home two, home three, home four. These are all the ways home exists. And they looked completely different and they were, they were completely different. But so why am I saying all this? That as I was listening to you, I was thinking that likeness comes in to create a possibility of a form that something could be. But then when likeness becomes, it must be as much like as possible, it starts becoming perfectionism and we lose the freedom and the self-expression and the power of that form to give us agency and movement and access and expression, self-expression. So that's what was going on in my head.
As you said that, I thought, there is a difference, isn't there, in going for the likeness of how a composer wrote a piece of music versus going for the likeness of how one experiences that music internally. Again, those are two different things, right? Am I going for the likeness of what spoke to them and how they heard it? Or am I going for the likeness of my experience and relationship to that piece? And, of course, what in terms of music, the setting you're in is going to set the intention for what that focus is about. I mean, again, we've said this, I think, last week or the week before. If you're playing with an orchestra and you're all playing a piece, give people an experience of Ravel, then you are aspiring to the likeness of how Ravel heard it. But if you're playing a Ravel piece with your own interpretation of it, that's a different experience. And so I think that always asking ourselves, am I aspiring, what's the likeness I'm aspiring for here? Because am I working to become whole in my own self and likened to my own being? Or am I somehow working to be like an outside source? That's, I think, where perfectionism comes in as an insidious
Okay,
thing.
as you were talking, I had an image of something I saw, and I would just love you to put this into this. So there's a piece called Debussy Sacred and Profane Dances. And the first movement is very pristine and sacred. I can't play it. And the second is waltz and it's movement and I remember I was learning this piece and I fell in love with it and it completely colored, you know, most of my chamber music that I've written, along with Ravel's Introduction and Allegro. These two pieces were written around the same time. But there was a moment where I saw a performer play this piece. And she came onto stage and she had this high white thing and she was very kind of off-putting. And as she was playing the first dance, I was like, oh, she's going to tear that off right before the profane dances. And it's going to be like, we're going to get to see these two things. I'm like, okay, let's go here. But that is not what happened. And instead, this artist imposed herself on the piece. And I as I'm saying this, I'm remembering what my teacher, Tony, the mime who spoke and did more whiteface, his physical eloquence. I remember him saying to us when we would be up on stage, he'd say, "You're leaking. Don't let your personality leak into." But I mean, and he wasn't saying your personality. It was like, don't let your inhibitions or what the way you're trying to hide or your quirks, don't let them leak into the story that you're trying to tell. So here we are talking about likeness, and the what we're talking about, surrendering to the eyes of love. And one of the reasons we're saying that is, well, for me, is because one of the things that I teach in the academy, because the academy is teaching skills, but it's also teaching how to be an artist, be the artist you are, discover the artist you are. And part of the way we do that is people share their work in 90-second videos, and I give feedback on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say the same disclaimer ahead of time, that as you watch this, get rid of assessment mentality. So, I mean, literally, this is your assessment mentality. Hold on to it, feel it. That is your assessment mentality. Drop it. Do this over and over and over again, because then eventually you will learn how to be able to experience your own work without assessment. And instead, you're looking with the eyes of discovery. And if you're struggling to do that, the easiest way to do it is to find something to love. If you're bombarded with, oh, that she did it better before, or I liked it better when she did that, or all of this stuff, I couldn't do it like that. Just find something to love. And if you can, it made me think about it when you proposed this, surrendering to the eyes of love, to seeing with love, opens up this world of discovery and connection versus assessment, which seems to pull us into perfectionism, which cripples us.
Absolutely. Because, when we surrender to seeing with the eyes of love, then I think we can engage with what Angela's Arian in the Fourfold Way talks about as the arms of love. And she talks about 5 arms of love. So I'm going to share those right now.
5 arms of love?
5 arms of love.
Okay, like 5. Okay.
5 arms.
Okay, got it.
5
Okay.
arms. Acknowledgement, validation, acceptance, recognition, and gratitude. So if we can surrender to the eyes of love, then we're going to acknowledge. So I can acknowledge, wow, I just actually spent 30 minutes at my Harp, even though maybe the subtext is 15 minutes of that I was jumping up and down with the dog. But, I kept coming back, but I'm acknowledging, okay, I set aside this time. I kept coming back. I'm validating. Good for me. I made that a priority. I held on to what I wanted. Accepting, okay, this was just the way the energy flowed. Recognizing that this is what I was able to do in that time, and expressing gratitude to myself that I held on to what mattered. That's a very different way of responding to that 30 minutes that ended up maybe being 15 minutes of quality time at the Harp than the perfectionistic, well, you said 30 minutes and you didn't do that. I mean, that would totally destroy any positive, good feeling I had about the experience I just had.
So I'm hearing that one of the things that you did, and we're getting these great comments. I want to pull the first one up in a sec. What I'm hearing is that you, and again, I think both of us are constantly doing this with the people in our communities, is bringing ourselves from what we aren't, from living in what we aren't, into being able to be in what we are.
Yes.
And I didn't have my glasses on, but I'm going to pull this up, what Kelly first wrote, because I kind of saw my own, okay. I think your personal experience with the piece also colored your interpretation of what she was experiencing. And I also read into that, Kelly, that I realized I was super judgmental. Like, I'm like, she shouldn't do this piece like this because it should be like this. And by imposing my judgmentalism about how you should play that piece, what you should wear, and like, I can't really get into it because of her. And like, seriously, can I not dream? Can I not, see beyond what a person has decided to? I mean, and it's interesting because another thing Tony always said to us was, we get up on stage and we think we're doing a thing, but people see everything we're trying to hide.
Right.
That's all they see. But with the eyes of love, I could have seen beyond that. I could have had a greater revelation in that moment. I could have experienced new things of that piece.
Right. That's right. Yeah, if you could have recognized, wow, this is a different artistic take than, and wow, I'm feeling grateful. I'm going to get to have a different kind of experience here and see what her creative self did.
Yeah, or even Hel
Yeah.
hey, hello, Deborah, regardless of how you try to hide yourself in life, because
Mhm.
you will, and maybe you don't think you are, but you are, regardless of how you try to hide yourself in life, you are still, as you reach out to an instrument, as you speak through an instrument, it will bring you to visibility of the soul.
Right.
I could have I could have known that then. Instead, I spent years, just trying to be like the hottest, biggest, whatever. Let's see. I'm just gonna
Go
pull
ahead.
up. So when I'm working classically, I have to constantly check myself as I find myself becoming very
Mhm.
mathematical technically, and so this is interesting because that is so valuable as a practice technique to have that mathematical, and yet it's when we realize the difference between practicing to get something by creating a container, and then that because it gives us freedom, and we get like Kelly's saying, we get caught in that mathematical technicality or technically, instead of realizing that I have this Karen Montanaro, the life of my teacher, talks about the two wings of expression, of the technical
Mhm.
wing, and then I will not do justice to what she has to say, but that these are the two wings that allow us, that allow technical ability to have us self-expressed. She was a ballet dancer. One of the things that I teach is how to actually connect with the techniques that you do have that you don't know you have,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
that you can be self-expressed in the moment. But these are all just different ways of engaging these. Um, okay, well, classical training tends us to think at times down these rabbit holes. Yes, and they're not meant as rabbit holes, of course.
Right.
We make rabbit holes out of them, and sometimes our teachers help us do that. Um, well, yeah. In becoming harpists ourselves, we so limit ourselves to fully appreciating the performances of our peers. Yes, if we start to get into that, yeah, and then we start to become. There are
Yes.
many people in Harp Academy who describe themselves as recovering classical harpists from having gone through this. And uh, and Kelly, at least we can at least becoming harpists. We limit ourselves to fully appreciate. This is an excellent conversation, but it's coming up. And in becoming harpists ourselves, we so limit ourselves to fully appreciating the performance of our peers. That can happen as we start focusing on the technique. We can, at least not necessarily from a competitive standpoint, from
Right.
a classical standpoint. And her final, in other words, we know the music, and so we see the difference between the standard and the scope, the possibility,
The score, the standard
the
of the
standard of
score.
the score. Okay, got it. Oh,
Mhm.
interesting. And this is so interesting for me as a composer, as a living composer, who sometimes it's really important for me that people play what's on the page, or that they play the rhythm that's on the page in certain places. And sometimes it's just, this is gestural. How do you make this musical gesture? How do
Mhm.
you get to, make it more me than me, if you can? Okay, I'm off on I just had too much coffee. Okay, all right. Here's Victoria is saying, why do you think we go to the place of judgment rather than appreciation or acceptance? Kathleen, our resident Jungian psychoanalyst, will answer this question for you.
I think it's because we're conditioned to do that. That from the time we're in utero and we come out, we start to experience judgment as part of the socialization process. And some of our, the behaviors of the 2 and 3 year old or the 6 month old aren't appreciated or accepted very, very lovingly. And so I think lots of times we go there by default. And by default, I mean, it's not like anyone sets out cognitively and says, oh, I'm going to go down this route of judging myself and being a perfectionist. But it kicks in automatically out of a fear of, and an attempt to be good enough. and to be accepted by other people. And so it's kind of an insidious automatic feedback loop. It's like a virus that gets installed on the computer, so to speak. And with consciousness, you can erase the virus, so to speak. You can uninstall it, you can remove it, but it takes consciousness. Because these things that we learn, those first 4 to 5 years in life, we learn vis-a-vis felt experience. The cognitive awareness of it comes much, much later. Yeah.
It's interesting when you were saying virus, Kathleen, I was thinking, no, 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 it's the default. And then I was listening more, I was thinking, no, it's not the default. It does have a mind. It starts to act as if it has a mind and intention of its own, like a virus, in that you can change
Yes.
it, but you come back the
Yes.
next day and it's there, and you come back the next day and it's there. And as the other thing I was thinking as
Yeah, because what happens is until that very early.
no,
Okay. We were doing this before we got online. And another thing about the virus is we can change it in the moment cognitively, but until we get back to that very, very early unconscious pattern and there's a healing of that, it's going to keep showing back up. It's like once the virus is there, it starts hijacking resources, would be a way of thinking about it. It keeps multiplying itself. And so, we have to, again, with consciousness, begin to be able to relate to it and, ultimately metabolize those that set it in place without acting as if those felt experiences in the body are about the current reality.
right. Okay. So what I'm hearing is, and I'm also hearing that it's not out to get us. It's literally out to protect us. It's like a protective mechanism. Um, we're getting kind of a fuzzy effect on the screen right now. I think, I don't know, maybe we are. So it's kind of like almost a self-defense run ragged or run wild. Let's go back and grab some of these, shall we? I'll just come back to Kelly saying, what if Debussy thought that? And I think she was speaking about, what if Debussy thought what I thought about gesture, and what I wrote, how I wrote pieces. So it would be interesting. I mean, I think my work just kind of falls between classical and jazz, or I'm using both forms. And maybe Debussy was in some of the things that he did. Um, yeah, I don't know. That's really interesting. Um, oh, from Monica's saying, whoops. For me, it is so much easier to look at others through the eyes of love. I think this is out of the fear of being judged. And this is one of the things that we actively do in the academy. Like literally, we have to practice it. And when part of the academy is learning skills, but part of it is as people share their work and we pull it up in 90 seconds, and people in the academy, it's academy of self-expression. So people are of vastly different technical levels, not just in terms of their playing of the harp, but people are bringing in other skills, storytelling, costuming, whatever it is that video making, whatever it is they're using to tell their story. And so one of the things that we do as we watch people is that I'm constantly, like every single time we do it, I'm saying, okay, when you see assessment, drop it. I think I just showed you this, right? I showed you this. So I'll show you once again, because you can't do it enough. Assessment, let it go. Feel that letting of go, and look at others. I think I just said this, but can't be said enough. As we look, if we can look at others with love, if we can look at others without assessment, if we can look at others with discovery, instead of, I can't do that, or how can she do that, or I wasted my life doing this, and so I can't do that. If we can actually say, wait a second, what's there that's going to open up for me? What can I take to my creative bank? What little thing can I find? One thing to love? Can I find one thing that I might be able to do? Did she raise her hand a certain way? Can I do that? Then we're starting on the journey to being able to actually appreciate it for ourselves. But I find that the distance between that is it's so much harder with ourselves, which makes me think there's a practice there I could be taking on that I haven't thought of. Okay, I love how these conversations are. Um, okay, think of the peers of Debussy, all those impressionistic artists. Well, we do know that Debussy's teacher stood behind him and said, "Modulate, damn it, modulate."
uh,
um, um, let's see. It's so fun. I wonder if Monet ever painted while Debussy played.
uh,
And wait, we missed. Did we? Oh,
we
okay.
missed one by
Yeah, by
Victoria.
our one of um our pal who's here. I feel like Victoria is like our third person. I think the labels such as classical can impose some unnecessary limitations to us.
Yeah.
What if we don't give myself a label or invent our own labels, write or change them like name tags?
Yeah, there's so much I could say about labels from a mental health perspective
Well,
and how.
please say it.
Well, I think that what Victoria is saying is really important, that once we put a label on something, we've put it in a box. I mean, we've really boxed ourselves in. And so the labels we attach to ourselves can be very detrimental, and sometimes they can give us the necessary containment. But I think we have to be careful because words are powerful, and words that are labels are powerful. And so you need to just be aware of what are you boxing yourself into, because that's what you're doing. And again, sometimes we need the box because the box is a limit. The box is a container. The box can be a safe place. But to only live in the box, you miss the rest of life. Again, I think at the heart for me, if I just sit down to practice pieces that tunes that I'm learning that other people have written, or most of my tunes are actually traditional Irish tunes, um, but I don't allow myself to improvise, then I've kept myself in too small of a box, because the improvisation allows me to have a different relationship to my inner world and the heart, and so I think we just have to be careful about labels. Yeah.
Um, as you were saying that, I mean, I was thinking many things, like, I don't know, but anyway, but what I was thinking, one was, so I fell in love with Debussy, Mahler, Bernstein, all as a kid, and just decided very early on, I am a composer. That is
Mhm.
me. I am a composer. But I started playing the harp as a way to make a living, and then I discovered that I was very fascinated with it, and in part because it was resisting me in all these ways, and that led to so many things in my life. The frustration with the instrument led to so much, the development of the DHC harp, the writing of all the stuff that I've done, and eventually my frustration that I was stuck in being a harpist and being like, well, fine, then I'll just start writing musical theater for me as a
Mhm.
solo artist, which kind of led me out of that box. So, but whenever people would say, "Do you really like your harp playing?" And I would think, yeah, but what I really am, I'm really a composer. What I really do is I really write musical theater. So
Mm.
now, I was never able to find yet. I have never been able to find a word that described. I mean, it is stories with music that moves me. It is the instrument of the harp that has become the vehicle through which I can most easily, immediately become that thing. Because
Mhm.
for me, it is very difficult to document that thing. So, like to make a
Mhm.
score and a script and whatever, but it's very easy for me to immediately give me a story. I'll tell it, I'll put the music like that. So, not having that box has been difficult in me being able to describe to others what I do so that they know how to engage. Fix that.
Well, I mean, it's it's
And I
interesting.
don't mean fix, I mean,
Yeah, well, but I don't think you need fixing at all. I think, there's a way that you want people to see a face of who you are that they're not going to see when you're the one playing the harp, but they are going to see when your name is on the program bill or announced from stage as the composer of the music. So I think that there's something again about being seen and being acknowledged and recognized for who you are. And it, when we really have that need for another to acknowledge and recognize us, sometimes it can be because there's some part of us that's still not acknowledging or recognizing that.
Right.
And
Okay.
once,
So,
yeah,
Kathleen, this is exciting.
yeah,
I know we don't have a lot of time yet, but
yeah.
how do you, and we have some wonderful comments we may not be able to get to, but so let's say here we are, and many of us may be in this exact same spot. We have a thing that we finally like, that there's a children's book, like, what am I? Are you my mother? Because I don't know what I am. And we come to whatever age and we're like, I still may not be able to describe who and what I am. And how do we get from that, like, I don't even know what I am, to full self-expression within the world of, so that,
Well, for me, it's in the minutia. I mean,
okay.
we can talk about it globally, but again, this is where the embodiment circle and the embodiment practices, and it is open for people who want to join to start December 21st. So I'll just put a plug in that if you're
Oh,
watching.
yeah.
Yeah, it opens on both solstices for people to join. Um, I think it goes back to stopping long enough to know what's happening in your body, and then being able to be aware of where you're tightening and resisting and learning to relax that. And then being able to tune into your breath and use that to connect with the larger self that comes in and that we can tap into vis-a-vis the breath, the larger self within and the connection to the creative source that's of all life. And then being aware of what our mind is doing and how that's connected to the body, and learning how to concentrate and focus on the essence, but you can't focus on the essence if you don't know what the essence of yourself in the moment is. And you're never going to know that if you don't have the psychic muscles to be aware of what's happening inside of you, even as you're engaging in a conversation like this. And most people have been trained to so try to imitate, be like the outside world, that they have no idea what's going on inside. So for me, the breakdown is building the psychic muscles. And I always say it's like going to the gym. You go to the gym and you lift 5 and 10-pound weights, 20-pound weights, not because you want to lift 5-pound weight or 20-pound weight, but because you want to lift the 20-pound bag of potting soil or dog food or horse feed or something. And so I think, taking the time to be present to oneself and listen. And most people don't do that. And our culture does not encourage it. And in fact, so much of our culture and social media and things are always inviting us outside of ourselves to focus on what it is they want us to focus on. Even now with TVs at the gas pump. I have a pet peeve about that.
Well,
I can't even sit and have an experience of what it's like for me to pump my own gas. I have to be bombarded by some advertisement.
bring it on, Kathleen.
All right. Yeah,
As you're speaking, a bunch of things floated through my mind. Oh, wow. I mean, I thought about a heron I saw yesterday. I thought about a conversation I had in a Greyhound bus 50, 60 years ago. So I'm just going to go to the Greyhound bus conversation because I've thought about it many times since. And the guy I was talking to, we were talking about music and questions, and he was a philosopher, and I was asking him how he's going to make, anyway, blah, blah, blah. But at one point he said, well, there's a difference between an artist and a painter. And I said, what are you talking about? And this was in the context of me saying, he's saying, why don't I like contemporary music? And I said, well, maybe you don't understand it. And he was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I can understand a sentence, but how do I understand, music? So we were talking about that. Anyway, so he says this thing about artists and painters. And he said, well, the painter loves the paint. The painter loves the paint. He or she's also an artist, but an art, it's not that they can't live within the same body, but the painter loves the paint. And as you were speaking and talking about labels, and I was wondering, how do I find this embodiment. And I was thinking about this heron I saw yesterday and how marvelous it was. And I thought, well, what if I couldn't tell it was a heron? What if I didn't know what it was? And I'd be spending all this time thinking, like, what are you? Instead of being amazed by it. And I was thinking, what if I put on a label, literally, I am a composer? And what does that mean for me in the world? How I engage with the world? And then I am a harpist. How do I engage with the world? I am a storyteller, engage with the world. How and maybe even bring the pictures of what I see as, a harpist or as a storyteller, the stories that have infused my life, not the stories that other people may have in their heads. And what that meant to me, that maybe I could start finding out what animal I am, and to be able to actually live within that animal, whether it has a label or not.
Yeah, and what I would say, and maybe the reality is you don't even have to put on the label because you are all of those things. That at the minute you come, come to the harp, you're also the composer. At the minute you start to compose, you're the harpist. It's all there. And so letting yourself begin to drop into that unity.
Well, I love that. I mean, I'm thinking, well, now I love the name tag thing, so I really got to try it. But then the composer of the harp, it is 10.
Yeah, we've got to stop.
Oh, but we have such amazing comments here.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna pull them up each one, and I know that we won't have time for all of them. I try to get out of me and become the music. I want to become part of the music. I likened it to walking in a very structured French garden, classical versus running pell-mell down a hillside, thinking Julie Andrews in The Sound of Music. In this, singing to the sky is more improv Celtic, everything but classical. So there's some image for me to play into here. And Victoria said, you are creator and connector. Okay, so maybe other words I might pull in and try them on. You use your creations to connect with yourself and with others. Not that you need more labels about it, but I love labels and boxes. I do love them. I do. If you saw my house, you'd realize that everything is labeled. And Kelly saying, as we age, we have to be careful to ensure we really know our authentic self. And that's why, it's why we do our work. It's why we create what we create. And certainly Kathleen and I are in that. Separate our soul from our experiences. And let us end with this. Tovala says, I am what I love. And what I'm hearing is, to become those eyes of love, to surrender, to being that am. Thank you.
It was wonderful. And you know what? Love to all of you over this next. And it's going to be a couple of weeks before we're back because we're here at the holiday season. So we will see you in the new year.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Kathleen. When I saw you this morning, I was like, it's like we're two little girls and we get to come into this clubhouse and do this. Thank you. And with all our friends, thank you so much.